Hi, my name is Kellie McCord. I'm a private tutor at Kellie's Tutoring. And in today's video, we're going to look at what are optional questions in exams and how do we prepare our children for these optional questions in exams. So in reality, we can consider all exams as optional questions in that examiners will go through the course content, look at all the materials, and then they will create questions. And not all of the content will come up in the exam, which is why quite often you will have students coming out of the exam hall quite disgruntled, complaining, "Oh, I spent hours revising that topic and it didn't even come up." And that's because the exams would be insanely long if we were to create an exam that covered all of the course content. Now, because of COVID-19, there's been great disruption in learning and a lot of anxiety and emotional upset. So the government are proposing to create more optional questions in exams, but rather than it being the examiners choosing, it will be for our children then to select a question that they want to answer. And the reason behind this is that they believe that students will then pick questions that they feel most comfortable with, that they are best able to answer. However, the truth of the matter is that that's not the case. Research has consistently shown that when presented with more options, students across the board tend to fall down. And we have to look at why is this? Now, I believe it's because of the skills. There are 3 skills required to make a choice, especially under exam conditions. Now, before we look at those, it's also worthwhile to know that actually your children will be faced with optional questions in exams already. For example, the 11 plus and the creative writing task, quite often they will have to make a choice whether to write a narrative, an essay, a description. And even at current GCSE level, there are already optional questions. For example, in English language papers, they quite often will have to choose to write a narrative, a descriptive. They may be given a sentence and they have to use that to generate a story. And so students already need this skill. So it is actually worthwhile for them to learn how to do it, not only for perhaps the potential changes that may occur, but actually because they are being assessed in this anyway. And it's a skill that will help them later on in their academic and professional skills, their professional life. So what are the 3 skills then that our children need to be able to thrive with these potential changes and to answer questions that already exist? Well, the first thing they need to know is they need to be able to assess the difficulty of a question. Quite often, the questions presented, some will be slightly easier. And that doesn't mean that students who are of higher ability will be able to necessarily answer them better, not at all, because it still requires a level of sophistication. It still requires students to not only apply their knowledge, but to also structure their answer. But questions will be slightly easier. And so the student in the exam conditions where there's pressure will need to be able to distinguish between those which are a little bit easier. So how can they do that? Well, first of all, perhaps it's better to relate it back to them, get into their world. If your child loves playing video games, ask them to look at their difficulty levels. What's the difference between easy mode and difficult mode? If your child likes playing football, what's the differences between professional and amateur? How do they know? If your child or teenager is an avid cook, look at recipes. Look at what makes a recipe easy and what makes one more difficult. By doing that, it engages them critically so that they can then apply that to real life exam questions. And to help bridge that gap, what you can do is have your child look at higher tier and foundation tier papers and to get them to look at the style of question, what's being asked of them. You could also get them to look at what they're currently studying and look at previous work that they studied a year ago. The second skill your child needs is to understand what is being asked of them. Exam boards all have what we call command vocabulary, and these are command words that are used in exam questions, and all the exam boards have their like a glossary of vocabulary that they will use for each subject. And if you look at the bottom of this video or in the blog, you will see links to some of the exam boards and their command words. And then thirdly, they need to be able to evaluate and have an awareness of their strengths and weaknesses. Quite often, our children do not know what they're really good at and what perhaps they find more challenging. Quite often, they will confuse what they love and what they hate with their ability. So, for example, your child may disdain math, they loathe it, they find it tedious, boring, and pointless. And yet, they're pretty good at it. And it's the same for certain topics within, for example, history or geography. They may have a case study in which they absolutely love, they're fascinated by it, and yet they might not fully grasp the nuances of it. And so how can we help them to develop their awareness? Well, get them to reflect on a task or an assessment. So before they start a piece, ask them to summarize what they think they have to do, what knowledge do they need to answer it. Then get them to answer the question, and then get them to grade it. Afterwards, using a mark scheme, get them to see what they actually would have got. See if they greatly overestimated or if they grossly underestimated their true ability. And you can also ask them to peer review. So if you have, their friends or a relative that is of close age to your child or teen, ask them to peer review, get them both to do a task, and then get them to mark each other's work. This is so vital because it gets your child to see how others view them. On top of that, it gets your child to step into the shoes of an examiner, so they get to think more critically. And again, it will help them to apply that to themselves. And finally, of course, speak to their teachers, their tutors, or any educators that worked with your child. Ask them specifically what areas or units did they struggle with, or did they thrive in? And getting that as a record can help your child as well to see where their teacher thinks they're at and if it is in alignment with what they feel or think. So those are my 3 top tips to help prepare your child for optional questions and exams. 1, develop a greater understanding of how to evaluate easier to difficult questions. 2, get your child to develop their understanding of the command words that are going to be used in their exam. And 3, to develop an awareness of their abilities, their strengths and their weaknesses, so that they can successfully choose a question that they will answer and not base it on what they like or dislike. Now, I'd love to hear your comments, place them down below, and remember to subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.